3 days ago, The Atlantic released a video authored by Van Newkirk titled "Environmental Racism is the New Jim Crow." The video is a 1.5-minute short produced by the left-wing Atlantic contributor Daniel Lombroso. In the video, Newkirk argues that poor water treatment in predominantly black communities is due to the planning of racist policymakers purposely putting black communities at a disadvantage. This is of course nonsense, but first I want to let Newkirk articulate his argument in his own words, so I'll play the short for you.
Yeah, I get it. The environment isn't a person. How can it be racist? But the most basic pieces of the environment, the air we breathe and the water we drink, are controlled and designed by people. And people can be racist. More than half of all people who live close to hazardous waste are people of color. Floodplains nationwide have high populations of blacks and Hispanics. Black children are twice as likely to suffer from lead poisoning as white children. This inequality is no accident. Pollution and the risk of disaster are assigned to black and brown communities through generations of discrimination and political neglect. Enslaved Africans were commodities partly because their work carried environmental risks that were unacceptable to whites, like exposure to heat, malaria, and mosquitoes. As Jim Crow laws created racial segregation, they also reinforced an environmental system that still disadvantages minorities. It's no wonder that black and Hispanic children have the highest rates of asthma, or that hurricanes like Katrina, Sandy, and Matthew did their worst damage in communities of color. Rich white neighborhoods can update their water pipes, but not places like Flint. The Jim Crow laws are dead and gone, but the fact that people of color are still more likely to die from environmental causes is no accident.
So let's start with some basic demographics. According to a U.S. Census Bureau study in 2010, African Americans tend to live in disproportionately metropolitan areas. The New York area has a black population of 61%, the Detroit area 60%, and the San Diego area 56%, Chicago area 54%, and Philadelphia area 53%. Most of these areas have a black population of about 4 to 5 times the national black percentage of 13%. This high percentage of blacks in metropolitan areas is largely due to the migration of blacks from southern rural areas to northern urban areas throughout the 20th century. So now that we have it established that metropolitan areas have a high concentration of blacks, we can show that metropolitan areas are less healthy. Numerous health studies show that people who live in urban areas, regardless of their race, are much more likely to develop asthma. According to a study released by the NIH, children who grow up in urban areas are more likely to develop asthma due to their air pollutants. The introduction of the study reads, quote, "Most asthma begins in childhood, and a number of environmental factors and lifestyle factors are thought to contribute to the onset of asthma. These factors include outdoor pollutants, including ozone and diesel exhaust, and indoor pollutants, such as tobacco smoke and nitrogen dioxide," unquote. If you didn't know, nitrogen dioxide is a gas commonly released from the burning of fossil fuels, motor vehicles, and cigarette smoke. Asthma is of course not the only downside to air pollutants in metropolitan areas. Residents in metro areas are susceptible to a wide range of lung disorders such as lung cancer and COPD. In addition to this, most hazardous waste sites are in the south, where the majority of blacks live. These sites are of course under the regulations of the EPA, which I presume Van Newkirk would agree isn't a racist agency and wouldn't allow these waste-producing industries to purposely harm black communities. In all reality, these health problems are mostly caused by simply living or working in a polluted area, which is completely independent of race. For Van Newkirk's argument to make sense, you must first believe that blacks live in poor conditions due to racism. However, this is clearly flawed. The reason that many blacks live in poor conditions is a result of their community's failed infrastructure. The level of black high school dropouts is slightly higher than that of whites. Nearly 70% of black children are raised in single-parent households. Studies released by the FBI show that despite making up only 13% of the population, blacks cause about 50% of murders, 32.5% of rapes, and about 55% of robberies. Overall, blacks cause nearly 38.5% of violent crimes, a percentage 3 times that of their population. All of these issues are problems that are destroying black communities, and they go on within black households and neighborhoods. Racism was a problem for black communities decades ago. The modern issues facing blacks lie in fundamental problems such as family issues, crime rates and drugs, poor education, and low wages. When Newkirk points out that it is more difficult for black communities to improve their water systems, he doesn't seem to account for all of these issues that have nothing to do with racism. The institutional racism that Newkirk is implying in this video no longer exists. Even if Newkirk was right, I don't seem to see his solution to the problem. Is his mission to overthrow politicians who don't support welfare programs for black communities or increasing regulations on industries? If this is the case, he has a very poor depiction of these politicians, who are very rarely racist, but rather just concerned for small businesses and balancing the budget. Newkirk points to the catastrophic hurricanes of Katrina, Sandy, and Matthews as evidence that black communities are more likely to be damaged by natural disasters. It is true that the poverty of these black communities made them ill-prepared for when disaster strikes, but as we have shown before, the reason for this poverty in modern day is not racism. What then is the main cause that black communities were devastated by these disasters? The answer is quite obvious. The paths of all 3 hurricanes directly hit communities highly populated by blacks. Katrina directly hit New Orleans, a city with a 60% black population. Hurricane Sandy directly hit the New York City metropolitan area, with a 61% black population. Hurricane Matthew hit hardest in North Carolina, which has a disproportionate black population of 22.1%. When all 3 of these hurricanes hit areas with black populations far above the median, it is to be expected that these natural disasters would do big damage to black communities. And when considering that black economic disparities in modern times are not a result of racism, discrimination has nothing to do with the extent of the damage caused by these natural disasters. It truly sickens me to see someone take a significant issue such as poor living conditions for blacks and exploit it by scapegoating racism to enforce their own agenda. I do not consider myself a conservative or even in full alignment with the Republican Party, but this is one of the primary issues I have with leftists. They will take an important issue that hits strong with people's emotions and sneak in their own biased agenda to strengthen the feds. They did it with gay marriage, they did it with climate change, they do it with abortion, and as Van Newkirk has just displayed, they do it with racial demographics too. This is the eyes of Argos. And I say we stop following the huge biased media outlets like sheep. Whether it be the Atlantic, CNN, or Fox News, think for yourself, question authority, and never stop seeking the truth.